Welcome to Americana Archives. Today's headline is Trailing the Upland Plover. The subheadline says, a wary bird that calls for the exercise of all the hunter's skill. It says, the sportsman, who knows his cover and the whims of the woodcock, may under certain season conditions always find his birds in satisfying presence as evening draws nigh on the willow-bordered rifts in the tidal creeks that flow into and out of the Delaware River on the Jersey side, was the encouraging remark of Bill Saunders of the Skulltown Creek Bailiwick in South Jersey. By the way, what we call a rift in those tidal waters isn't the same thing as what are known as rifts in the Upper River and Pennsylvania creeks. The latter are shallow rapids in a stream, where the bed is stony. What we know as a rift in a tidal Jersey creek would be called a raft, I suppose, in the South. It's a collection of driftwood and other debris left by the tide at high water. These rifts are of shifting size, seldom more than 2 rods wide, and perhaps twice as long. We have what we call fast land meadow and movable marsh along the creeks in that low-lying country, and dense patches of willows find their opportunity for thrifty growth out from the border of the fast land as far into the marsh as the soil is sufficiently stable to sustain them. These rifts frequently lie well up under a willow thicket extending well out toward the river, and are always edged with reeds and close-growing cattails. Always touched by the flood tides, these rifts are kept moist, and where the willows come down over them, insects that the woodcock like breed and dwell in sufficient number to bring those game birds when the season is dry on the upland feeding places down to the damp rifts. On a cloudy day, I have between dusk and dark bagged a dozen woodcock on one little rift. The fast land meadows are ditched to drain them, and they grow a coarse grass which is cut and serves well as winter forage for cattle. The ditches and the hay thrown up in cocks here and there about the fields serve as convenient and necessary masked batteries for sportsmen hunting upland plover, which strange birds find those low-lying fields good providers of the food they like, and consequently frequent them in quest of it. The upland plover is so shy and wary that no gunner can get within 200 yards of one if it catches a glimpse of him. Yet it is such a shallow pate that it will come up to anyone who will imitate its shrill, plaintive cry and be shot, or will often sit out the bombarding of a hunter so long as he keeps out of sight until the last bird of the flock is bagged. But to get within gunshot of an upland plover, the hunter must be something more than cautious. In feeding, the plover trips about in the grass, feeding on the run as it seems, and every little while it lifts its head above the grass and takes a quick and searching look all around, to be on its guard against danger. I have many a time crawled up the bank of a creek, bordering one of these fields, or shoved my head stealthily over the top of a ditch, running through the field, and discovered 15 or 20 plovers thus engaged, but too far away for a shot. If the feeding ground is satisfactory, so experienced creekmen say, the plover will not respond to and follow a call. And if that is so, I have almost invariably found on being confronted with such a situation that the feeding must have been entirely satisfactory. I can't imagine anything more aggravating than to gaze out on a collection of choice game like that beyond the reach of a gun, and to know that it will rise and put itself instantly still further away if you show so much as a nose above the bank. About the only chance the hunter has, in a case like that, to bring any of those birds to bag, is to rise and flush them, with the hope that they will mark down closer to the top of some other ditch, or along the creek bank, or in gunshot of some haycock. A plover hunter who has his heart in the sport doesn't mind time or trouble if he can only get his work in on the birds at last, and anyone who thinks he can go out and get plovers without using up quite a lot of time and being put to all sorts of trouble and work has a good many more things coming to him. One time I had sneaked along a ditch, having heard the whistle of a plover somewhere in the field, and crawled to the top to locate its source. Away out in the middle of the meadow, with no haycock near them, and at least 200 yards from where I was in the ditch, I saw a big flock of plover at work in the grass. Off to the right, about as far from them as they were from me, were several haycocks. The creek was half a mile away, and into it another ditch led on the other side of the field opposite to the one where I was in the ditch. If I flushed the birds, there was a chance of them marking down over in the vicinity of the haycocks, in the rear of which I could get by a roundabout but easy way. There was also the chance that they would perversely light away off by the creek, or worse still, take flight and not come down until they came to the ditch on the opposite side of the field. There was no hope of my getting a shot from where I was, so I rose from the ditch to flush them and take my run of luck. The birds rose the moment I stepped above the bank, and with one accord never came down again until they reached the far side of the field. As I marked them down, though, They seemed to alight not far from the edge of the ditch there, and that was some comfort. To get near that spot without being discovered by the plover, I would have to creep along the ditch I was in for a quarter of a mile to the creek, and then along the creek, crawling under its low bank for nearly half a mile, and then up the ditch on the far side of the field, a quarter of a mile further, making a mile of creeping and crawling, mud in some places a foot deep, stumbling in muskrat holes, and forcing a way through masses of thick reeds. I was just 1 hour making my way over that forbidding and wearying course, quite a distance of which I found I had to wade in the creek up to my neck before I came to the spot I had marked from the other side of the field, locating it by a tree near the upper edge of the ditch. Crawling up the bank just far enough to let one eye get a sweep of the field, I saw the flock of plover busy with their feeding, not 50 yards away. Then I smiled a long and pleasant smile, took a rest from my laborious journey, and prepared for my reward. I picked off 17 plover one by one out of that lot before the rest of them began to notice that something was wrong. Then they began to run excitedly about, calling plaintively, and I rewarded myself with 3 more of the birds before the others concluded that something really was happening to them, and they rose in flight. I was good shot enough to stop 2 of the fugitives on the wing, and thought then that I had not lived and struggled in vain that day. But the best way to hunt upland plover on those South Jersey meadows is to have at least 3 in a party. Hunting with a dog is of course out of the question. The birds can then be flushed to and fro over a field, and shots be had by hunters hiding in the ditches or behind haycocks as the flushed birds fly. Some of the South Jersey natives can imitate the cry of the upland plover to perfection, and succeed in getting bags that otherwise would have escaped them by luring the birds to their hiding places or blinds. One old-time plover hunter of the Skulltown Creek district, as showing how addlepated these birds can be, has a story of how a big flock of them permitted fate to overtake them once. There were 4 hunters in a party, besides himself, and a lot of plover had been located in the center of the field, out of gunshot of any of the party. The hunters had taken position at each corner of the field. One of the hunters rose and flushed the birds. They flew toward one corner of the field, and discovering the hunter who was there, turned and headed for another corner. How they came to discover the hunters one after another in all parts of the field, so that they were turned from one corner of it to another without having a chance to light. The old Skulltown Creek native says he never could find out, but they did, and the hunters came closer and closer together toward the center of the field, the birds keeping up their turning and twisting as they saw one and the other of the party advancing, until each hunter was within easy shooting distance, and there that party of 5 hunters just picked those fool plover off in the air until there wasn't one of them left to pick. Upland plover shooting in South Jersey isn't what it was though. Only a few years ago the cry of this bird filled the air from July to December in the early mornings and as evening drew near. And the flocks of them that came to feed in the wild marsh bordering the meadows along the Delaware were large and numerous. Like the shorebirds of every conceivable variety, they used to swarm in those marshes and along the oozy banks. The upland plover grows annually scarcer and scarcer. This story came from the great state of New York, being reported in the Sun of October 8th, 1911. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.